Maybe not everyone's heard of the central nervous system or the role it plays in everything we do.
One of the main pieces of information that's generated to our central nervous system to figure out where we are when we walk and run and stand is the change in tension of the fascia at the bottom of the foot.
People could just start with buying an off-the-shelf footbed, and if it's about the right shape for your foot and kind of works with your foot shape, then that could be all they need.
Take your riding to the next level with Cycling Demystified. Brought to you by Foundation Bike Fit and Frequency Cycle Works. This week, Way sits down with master bike fitter Tony Corke for the second part of their conversation about the role of cycling-specific shoes. If you've been struggling to get your feet comfortable, then this episode is for you.
All right, so welcome back to the
Cycling Demystified
podcast,
Hooray.
Mr. Tony Corke.
Oh, thank you.
Of Torke Cycling, master bike fitter. Can we say that? Yeah.
Say whatever you want. It's your podcast.
We'll just call you Tony.
Yeah,
Big Tony.
Better. Tony.
Anyway, where are we, Tony?
We are in my bike fitting studio in Poulton, which I pretend is in Bristol. It's near Bristol.
Oh,
And it has a Bristol postcode. And we just had some tea and clotted cream and scones on this cold winter afternoon.
yeah. We did do the listeners a favour by eating before rather than on the podcast.
Yeah, we're fueled up, ready to go.
But yeah, you know, just
Fat
getting
loaded.
Yeah, fat loaded. Absolutely. Oh, my goodness, it was good though. Wasn't
Yeah, it was great. So good.
it? So if we fall asleep halfway through,
Suddenly, nod off.
yeah, absolutely. What else? And we're washing it down with a cup of tea and some milk from the farm, dairy cows. All right, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We are talking about feet, everyone's favourite topic. Feet and cycling insoles, maybe some cycling shoes. But yeah, I think today I really wanted to kind of delve a little bit deeper into the role of insoles, orthotics, arch support in the specific context of cycling, which I think people are still a little bit confused about, or maybe the knowledge isn't quite out there yet, or there seems to be some confusion around how the mechanics of cycling works in relation to how a footbed or arch support should help compared with other instances of arch support and insoles. Primarily when people are walking and running, and there's a very different kind of use case. So I wanted to pick your brains, Mr. Bike Fitter, about how we should go about and think about arch support and how to activate our feet.
Well, you already said one of the buzzwords that sets me off.
Oh no!
Which is arch support.
Oh.
There you go.
There you go.
Let's talk about that before we go
Yeah.
any further. If we want to change how people think about this, then using the very word arch support is not going to help us think in the right way. So maybe a little bit of background here. I want to say that I'm a student of Paul Swift, who got a patent on wedges and run a company called Bike Fit Systems, and did the biggest piece of work really to start teaching bike fitters about wedges and what goes on with people's feet. And then I would also like to say that I'm a big proponent of Steve Hogg's approach, having looked at lots of different ways to set up people's feet. One of the things I've come to recognize is we're dealing with the central nervous system. And one of the ways that people approach feet, not just in cycling, but in running and gait analysis, is through a biomechanical model. And what I mean by that is that they're looking at alignments of the limbs, the alignment of the knee. Where is the knee over the ankle, over the foot? And what is the foot doing mechanically? Is it pronating or over-pronating? Is it collapsing? Is that arch dropping? And then maybe, if we talk in that language and we use those ideas, then we need to support the arch because it's collapsing and the knee's deviating, it's moving across as the foot collapses. So we need an arch support. And it took me quite a number of years to figure out that that isn't what's really happening here, and that's not what we're trying to achieve. We are not trying to hold the arch up. So we don't need to support it. I'd rather call it a arch toucher. And yeah, that makes us burst out laughing because that just sounds stupid and silly. So maybe that's the reason we don't say arch toucher. Do you have arch touchers in your shoes? But that would be a more accurate description and help us think better about what this thing does. It stimulates our central nervous system, which then makes our brain choose a different way of moving, which is slightly different from the purely biomechanical approach.
Yeah. Just before we get any deeper into that, could you explain a little bit more about the central nervous system for anyone who...
The short answer is no. Okay, how to explain that? So central nervous system being your nerves, which there are massive bundles of in all of your joints, and also more in your feet and in your hands and in your face, like your tongue and your lips are very sensitive, and your jaw has big bundles of nerves in it. And your body picks up these signals which they send, and they're signals based on really force or pressure. And it helps the body understand where it is in space. So if I closed my eyes, I can still feel I'm sitting on this chair, and I still know where my feet are without seeing them with my eyes. How do I know that? Well, there's force going into nerves in my body, and like I said, in most of the joints. That give me essentially my relationship of my mass and gravity and my support. So the chair being a support, the ground being a support, and my body mass versus the gravitational force.
Yeah.
And my central nervous system is what sends all of those messages to the brain, and the brain then decides what it wants to do with those pieces of information. And I'd also like to say that the brain uses about 90% of its computing energy at any one time to do that work of the central nervous system. So it's not insignificant. It's one of the main reasons why you and I, at the end of today, will find a flat platform to lie on, and hopefully a soft and comfortable one, wrap ourselves in blankets and rest and recover.
Yeah.
From what? What have we done all day? Well, we've just been eating cake and talking about bike fitting. So not much. But the body needs to recover. Again, from what? Well, from all of that computing work it's been doing, the central nervous system constantly running so that we can go about our daily lives and eat cake and talk and gesticulate without falling over, essentially keep ourselves supported. And so that information from the feet, the central nervous system, picking up all of these millions of pieces of feedback and then deciphering which ones are the important ones and then feeding those to the brain and then the brain making decisions on is enough for a day's work.
Yeah.
You know, and also thinking about listening to what you're saying and talking myself, making responses. But 90% of our brain's energy is devoted really to central nervous system tasks. And that's Dr. Roger Sperry, who won a Nobel Prize for brain research. Yeah, that's a quote, a paraphrase from his book. So, yeah, that's sort of what we're dealing with. Does that explain
Yeah.
the central nervous system?
I think I just want,
I don't
yeah.
know.
So maybe not everyone's heard of the central nervous system
Yeah,
or the role it plays in...
I certainly hadn't when
yeah.
I started bike fitting.
Yeah, in everything we do, but within the context of what we're about to talk about in bike fitting, which is essentially just kind of movement and movement assessment and figuring out how to move. Well, what we do as bike fitters is essentially try to figure out how people move best within the confines of cycling. And so in order to understand that, we need to understand how the body works and how the central nervous system affects everything that we do.
Yeah, it's super cool, isn't it? I think when I finally discovered these things, it was explained to me how this works. I was like, whoa, that's so cool. So one thing that happened, you're right for me to carry on.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, you learnt that from Steve Hogg.
Well, actually, no. At Bike Fit Systems, when we were working there, Paul Swift made pedal extenders, which put your foot a bit further away from the bike, and you could buy them independently. So you could buy just to right or just to left.
Yeah.
and they sold way more lefts than they did rights. And their question was, why was this? Why are people only buying lefts? And we started realizing that this is a common trait for a cyclist to drop down to their right side, which pushes their knee in close to the bike. It sort of twists their pelvis. If you imagine sitting off to one side of the chair, the right knee goes in, if the right side drops down, and the left moves away, which puts the knee out further from the bike, so you might want to push the foot a bit further out from the bike. But the question was, like, why do people do that? And why do they drop down to the right side on a bicycle? And it was, we didn't really figure out the answer there until it was Steve Hogg who first recognized that there's a fundamental problem in cycling for our central nervous system that puts us into essentially a panic mode or a protection mode or I don't really like this situation, so I will protect my favorite side.
Yeah.
And most of us, our favorite side is our right side. So pedaling, moving, our right leg. And it's not necessarily the one you're most coordinated with or your strongest one or your facile one. It's just the one you want to protect. So most of us want to protect our right leg. So when something's off on the bike, saddle too high, bars too far away from us, then it's very common for us to drop down to that side.
And this is a subconscious kind of decision.
Absolutely. We have no idea that we're doing it until maybe we have that saddle sore on that right side or the left side, or only my right hand goes numb, not my left, just my right. Or I really get this knee pain on my right, not on my left. Or you go and have a bike fit and the guy says, you're dropped off to one side. Now, people come to a bike with asymmetry, standing asymmetry. So they're not often completely symmetrical before they sit on the bike. What I'm talking about is that irrespective of whether you already have asymmetry in your body, you're likely, with a poor setup of the bike, to have even greater asymmetry and more likely to drop down to your right side than you are to your left. And one of the main things that Steve recognized was that the connection for the central nervous system between the brain and the feet doesn't really transfer with almost all cyclists. So your brain, subconscious brain, again, we're not talking about your conscious brain, we're not talking about I can't feel my feet, it's subconsciously, I don't really know where my feet are in space. I know they're there, I can see that they're there, and I can still get good connection to my hip, my knee and my ankle, but the actual foot itself, I'm not quite sure what that is. And for 98% of humans on bicycles, this means they don't make the most coordinated movement that they could, and they're much more likely to be dropping down to this right-hand side. And in this sort of central nervous system freak-out mode. I don't really know what I'm doing. Protect the body, drop to my right side. And he was one of the first people to recognize that that's what was happening on bikes, with humans on bikes. And he also did some work in trying to figure out how to resolve that. And it's a two-part problem. One is we don't have perfect feet. The other is that we just bend over a lot on a road bike. And so we flex our lumbar spine. And we basically, to solve that problem, got to resolve one of those problems. Either the lumbar spine issue, bending over, so most people on a Dutch bike or on a beach cruiser, sitting completely upright, don't have a problem. Their central nervous system knows where their feet are. But almost everyone on a road racing bike or triathlon bike or cross-country mountain bike, they have this problem where they don't really know where their feet are in space. So again, it comes down to, well, what's the problem with that? Coordination, control of movements.
So just to kind of recap a little bit, just to break it down, because we covered quite a lot of stuff there. Then what we're saying is that the central nervous system has a protection, or will kind of protect the body if you're sitting in a slightly suboptimal position,
Yeah,
a
it's
position
stressed.
that kind of challenges
Yeah,
the body in
yeah.
a certain way, and it will subconsciously try to compensate in some kind of way
We'll try
towards
and
the
make
dominant
one
leg
side, we'll try and protect one side, making it easier to make those movements on its favourite side.
on its favourite side.
Yeah.
And this is a completely normal
Yeah.
reaction. Like, this is normal. If you do this, this is normal.
Subconscious, so like I said, I didn't even know it existed. And
Yeah, yeah.
but yeah.
And this is the job of the central nervous system. It kind of makes those subconscious decisions in order for your body to just get on with life. It will just kind of
Absolutely.
get on.
90% of your
yeah,
brain energy is subconscious decisions made on your behalf so that you can eat cake and chat and sit on your chair without falling off it. Yeah.
So, but once we're aware of it, then we can start to kind of work around it, I guess, or be aware of
Yeah, absolutely.
our position in space.
Right. When you know that people drop down to their right sides when something's off, then as a bike fitter,
Yeah,
we can, oh, look, that person's dropping down to their right side. Maybe something's not quite right here.
yeah, yeah.
What is it?
Yeah, yeah. And it's always interesting. I love getting people in for a bike fit and showing them just kind of what's happening. Because like one of the biggest parts of, or the most revealing parts of the bike fit is just when we video somebody
Yeah, right.
and show them
Yeah,
the video of
totally.
how they're sitting on the bike.
Yeah, we don't see ourselves when we cycle.
And although we place a lot of emphasis on how you feel on the bike, what you feel is not always what is happening because there's
Yeah.
subconscious kind of movement.
Yeah.
So if you can show people, oh, actually, yeah, you're kind of dropping down to the right side, your right knee's coming in, your left knee's going out, and they suddenly become aware of it, and they're like, oh, do I need to do something about this? And I guess that's the question as well. Do I need to do something about it?
Yeah, and that comes back to this idea of biomechanical optimum. And we're moving away from that, and everyone seems to be moving away from biomechanical ideals, like everyone needs to look like this, and everyone needs to be in alignment, and everyone needs to have their knees over their feet when they do squats, or everyone needs to run with this particular style and form. What we realise is, no, they don't. Everyone looks a bit different and doesn't necessarily need to change the way they do things. But what we do need to do is make it as easy as possible, in bike fitting, as easy as possible for you to do the work at hand, the jobs, which is essentially pushing hard on the pedals and holding your body in place. And my job as a bike fitter is to find out the easiest way for your body, with whatever patterns of movement it has, to allow you to do those jobs as easy as possible. So oftentimes it's not about the rider changing the way they move. It's not really a technique sport. So if someone's knees driving into the top tube, or actually I used to hear a lot of coaches, cycling coaches, train their riders to put their knees close to the top tube. If their knees came out, then the coach would be like, no, that's not the right way of cycling, you need to put your knees in. And some people could and did that naturally, and other people couldn't at all and would fight endlessly to try and do that. And I don't think we need to worry about those things. We really need, as bike fitters, to try and make the bike match that rider. So if your knees don't come in, then don't force them to, but set the bike up to allow you to move easily. Now there is a caveat there that quite a lot of us who ride bikes, middle-aged men and women in Lycra, don't have optimal function in our bodies. Muscular tightnesses, movement patterns that we just don't work quite as well as we once did. And we can do work on our own bodies to improve their ability to move, and that often can help significantly for us to cycle better. But once you've reached your limit or are not interested in changing your ability, then in either case, bike fitting helps to make it as easy as possible for you in your current state of function, your ability to move, to ride this bike. So, if you are dropping down to your right side because the saddle's too high, and your knee's coming into the top tube on the right and the left is moving out, you could try and stop that from happening and try and straighten your legs up and not sit on that right-hand side of your pelvis where you're getting that pressure point, where you're getting that saddle sore. You could try and undo that, but you're basically fighting your central nervous system, which is commanding all of these choices anyway, and it's sort of impossible.
Yeah.
So it's not really a technique sport. You can't really sort of change the way you move. When we change the setup of the bike, that's how we influence how your body moves.
Yeah, I always try and explain bike fitting as creating the environment for your body to move in the best kind of way possible.
Right.
So if the environment, which is your bike, doesn't allow your body to move in the way it wants to, then you're never going to achieve the kind of goals that you want to, or as well as you could do. So it's figuring out that kind of relationship between bike, how much do you adjust the bike, how much do you work on the body. But let's go back a little bit to challenges and talking about the central nervous system. And the two challenges that you talked about were kind of lumbar flexion.
Bending over, bending forward.
And then losing kind of proprioception.
Not having perfect feet, exactly. And so we don't want to sit upright on a bicycle, most of us, because when you do ride a beach cruiser, it's absolutely fun on the beach. But if you're using it as a mode of transport to get to work and you realise, I'm 10 minutes late, and you want to start pushing hard on the pedals to get there quicker, you realise, this bike sucks. And you actually end up trying to lean forward, not to get aero, but just to get your glutes firing better. And so most of us do want to bend forwards because it really does help that third massive muscle group of ours to be engaged. It just allows us to pedal harder and easier. So we don't want to sit upright. So what else can we do? Well, resolving what's going on at the foot, basically giving it more information. So our feet aren't completely flat. Most people's feet are not completely flat. And one of the main pieces of information that's generated to our central nervous system to figure out where we are when we walk and run and stand is the change in tension of the fascia at the bottom of the foot. So we heel strike, then we roll down usually the outside of our foot, the lateral edges, and then we move inwards onto the ball of our foot. So we heel strike on the, if you look at your shoes, they're probably worn on the outside edges. And when I mean outside, like little toe side. So if you take your shoe off and you look at the heel, it's probably more worn towards the little toe side. And that's very common and normal. And so you roll down that side and then move from that side across to the big toe side. And then your toes flex, and it's at that point that you push off. And so there's a big change in the fascia on the bottom of the foot from the heel strike to the roll and pronation across to the toe off. And that sends lots of information to the brain about where your foot is and what it's doing, and it is usually very happy. And bear in mind, when you walk and run, you're not bending forward like you are on a drop bar, handlebar bicycle.
That's how we're designed, right? We are designed to walk and run, and so the whole mechanism of our foot is designed to kind of move through that kind of process, which is called the windlass mechanism. And that kind of creates all that kind of process of moving the fascia sends signals back to the central nervous system. So the brain, again, as you were saying earlier, knows kind of where it is in space. And then, we can go through that gait cycle. We can walk and without having to think about it.
Control the movements very well without the body going into freak out mode. I don't know where my feet are. But on the bike, that doesn't happen. And so one of the ways that we improve the signals to our central nervous system, so it knows where the feet are, because that's the fundamental issue, is that it doesn't really know where the feet are. It's not getting enough information. So one of the ways we do that is with that thing that I wanted to call a foot toucher, an arch toucher, or what other people call an arch support.
Yeah. So just before we go there,
Yeah.
just make it really clear why that kind of roll windlass mechanism doesn't happen on the bike.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. Well, the carbon soles that we enjoy that allow us to
The
put so
super
much force
stiff carbon
through
soles.
that tiny pedal axle, that small pedal, is just a very stiff carbon sole, and that keeps our foot in a singular position. So there's no heel strike, there's no pronation across, and there's certainly no toe off. It's in the same. It's like doing. You're doing reps with your legs. You're like doing a squat in the gym.
Yeah.
So.
Your whole foot's
It's
flat
kind
on
of
the
static,
floor.
yeah.
Yeah. You're not rolling the foot. You're not pushing through the ball of the
Yeah.
foot. You're using the whole of the foot,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
to kind of push down with.
Right.
And I tend to describe like the shoe becomes the floor,
Yeah.
or that becomes your pedal.
Yeah.
And because it's stiff and it's carbon, it doesn't bend. Then we don't function in the same way as we were designed to,
Right.
which is primarily to walk and to run.
Yeah.
So we lose something when we cycle. We kind of shove our feet into these carbon boxes, as
Yeah.
Colby Pierce describes, carbon coffins,
Yeah.
and attach them to the pedals, and
Yeah.
off we go.
And I like to remember that cycling is the most efficient means of locomotion that we have, just using our own human power. There's nothing better. If you want to travel a certain distance with the least energy in, then cycling is the best. But as you point out, we're not actually designed for it. We can do it, and it's highly effective.
Yeah.
We're not actually designed to do it.
Yeah.
And one of those problems. And so most people don't even know that they don't have this connection with their feet. In fact, plenty of professional cyclists and professional teams that I've met and talked to don't know this is a problem.
Yeah.
So we think that consumers don't know it's a problem. Well, first of all, bike fitters don't know it's a problem. This wasn't explained to me in the first 6 years of my bike fitting, full-time professional bike fitting life.
Yeah.
I was getting to travel around the world, meet loads of people, and it still hadn't been mentioned once.
Yeah.
So it's largely unrecognised. Like people don't know that this is a problem. People don't. I met a lot of bike fitters that use footbeds, but they don't know why. They know they work, but they don't really know what they're trying to solve. I didn't when I started using these things.
Yeah.
I was just using them, and they seemed to have a good effect.
Yeah.
It took me a lot longer to understand
Yeah.
what it was doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I had the pleasure of working in bike shops for most of my career, and it was only through that I could try on like hundreds of different types of shoes. I was just going through shoes like every week. I'd try on, different shoes. I'd be like, oh, maybe this one will work. Maybe this one will work. And I'd always get like a hot spot on the outside of my right foot, but couldn't work it out. It was only until I started playing around with
Wedges.
wedges
And
or
footbeds.
insoles that like I was like, oh, I could actually ride quite a lot of different shoes.
Yeah, so insoles, footbeds, arch supports,
Yeah.
all the same thing,
Yeah.
right? You've got lots of words to describe the same thing.
Yeah. So break that down for us. Like what's well, apart from arch tickler, foot tickler,
Arch toucher.
arch toucher. What are we doing with these arch touchers?
So the one that comes in the cycling shoe is designed so it doesn't hurt anybody. And, mass-produced shoe, you want everybody to be able to use it, and you don't really want it to hurt anyone or do harm to anyone. And that's quite a different objective from optimizing that for an individual. Yep, this is absolutely the best for you. Well, it can't be if it's also got to be the best for this other person who has a really low arch and yours is really high, and they've got a really wide foot and yours is really narrow. Well, I can't make that one shoe fit everybody. So what manufacturers do is just try and make it sort of acceptable for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And they certainly do that with their insoles, the piece of foam that comes in the cycling shoe that you can remove.
Yeah.
You might call that an insole.
Yeah. Yeah. If you've got your cycling shoes near you, just kind of reach inside.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not too smelly.
It will be, if you've been cycling. There's no way around that.
Yeah, take out the insole, and you'll notice kind of how thin and.
But also the arch. You know what we're talking about. One of the main mechanisms for improving the body's awareness of where it is and stopping it going into this compensation mode and trying to protect its body because it's freaking out because it doesn't know where the feet are. One of the main mechanisms is to touch the arch, and you'll notice that most footbeds just don't have anything that's really high enough to touch a lot of people's arches. Now, if you have really low arches, then maybe it is, and some manufacturers' stock footbed is a bit higher than others.
Yeah.
And so, for some people, they are getting what they need from the stock footbed, but it's pretty rare. And even when I've seen a few manufacturers give you a few different arch pieces that Velcro on, Gyro is one of them.
Yeah.
Come in some of the Rafa shoes they used
Shimano,
to.
yeah.
Shimano. You can Velcro on and off like different heights. It gives you the illusion that you've got some options, and if you've got a high arch, you put the high one in and it'll be good for you. But again, they play things really safe, and the high options are often not even high enough for a medium or even a low arch. So they're really not touching the arch, and we have to try something else.
Yeah, and just delving a little bit deeper into the arch itself, like just to clarify, the arch contains a lot of sensory kind of nerve endings.
Yeah.
Kind of almost like your hand, would you say?
Right.
Like your foot should be almost as sensitive as your hand.
Yeah.
And so to create better connection between your feet and your brain and your nervous system, you have to be able to stimulate all those sensory nerve endings.
Yes.
And you're saying we do this by contacting.
Touching it, and that
Creating
most
contact,
shoes don't contact it. The arch in the insole is not high enough to make contact with the arch of your foot.
Yeah, so there's a big space underneath that kind of arch.
So the base of your toes, they contact very firmly. A lot of load goes through there. And the outside of your foot, that contacts. And the heel, that contacts. But there's not contact through the arch.
Yeah.
And as we've been saying, there's lots of nerves right there that benefit from being touched.
Yeah. So the solution is just to kind of create more touch.
Yes. Yeah.
A bit like giving someone a hug.
Yeah, exactly. And that's different from the shoe fitting. Which is also something that we talk about a lot in Bike Fit. Shoes that fit. These are two different things, because really we're talking a shoe that fits. We're talking about the shape of the shoe, that it's got the right length and it's got the right width, even the right shape of the toe box. Some have pointy toes and some have kind of square toes. Then we also have a depth or volume of foot. So some people have like a really thick, chunky, fat foot, and others have a really low profile, skinny, flat foot. And some people have a really high instep just above the arch, and some people it's really low profile. And some people have a really narrow heel, and some people have a really wide heel. And so that's all shoe fit issues. And ideally, you have a shoe that fits your foot and all of those elements. And then you need an arch piece that touches. If the one that comes with the shoe doesn't, and it probably doesn't, then you need another solution.
So let's stay on with the arch. I was going to say arch support then.
I know.
It's been ingrained.
Exactly.
Yes, so the footbed. Let's stick with footbeds for the moment. So what are the solutions? What can people do? What things are out there? What can people buy? How do fitters solve this kind of issue with footbeds? Because there's a lot of stuff out there.
So there's lots of footbeds, and again they do have sort of different terms. But in cycling, and I'm just going to refer to cycling and no other sports at the moment, then they're all kind of the same. So you might have a podiatrist-made orthotic, or you might have a footbed that comes in the shoe. if it touches your arch, it's doing the same thing. If it touches your arch in the right way. And there's a chance that both of those things could be doing that. Or the one that you got off the shelf does it better than the one that's made by, that is the custom orthotic. But there's 4 sort of kinds of footbed, if you like. There's the pre-shaped stock footbed. So it's a footbed that you buy in different lengths, but it has a pre-shaped arch.
Yeah, so like Specialized maker, like small,
Bontrager,
medium, large, Bontrager,
Specialized, Superfeet.
Yeah.
What are the other ones?
Correx,
Correx,
Jinx.
those kinds of brands.
Yeah.
There's loads.
So you can just go over and just buy them off the shelf. And
then there's pre-made, pre-shaped, but with adjustable arch pieces. And a current favourite in bike fit world is the G8 Australian brand. Benefit of that is that it comes with different arch height pieces, so you can fiddle around and play with them and see which one works for you, and also move them backwards and forwards.
Yeah, so the position of
in
the
and
arch.
out a bit. Yeah, so the chances of it being right for you are much higher. Now, if the one that's stock out of a box, like the Correx or the Specialized, fits you very well, then you don't need to go any further than that. But if it doesn't, and it still feels like not quite right, it's either not touching fully, or it's touching too much, like it's painful or uncomfortable, or it just feels weird, then you probably need to keep searching. So then the G8 would be next. Then you have footbeds that are heat moldable, and that's another fairly big category. There's lots of different ones. From ones where you just put it in the shoe and stand on it, they don't seem to work very well, because what we're trying to do is get the arch to go into the foot, the arch of the footbed to match the underside of your foot. When you just stand on it, the chances are you're just going to compress it and collapse it. So we have devices made, probably the most famous one is by CDAS, who are famous in ski boot fitting and running shoes, but also in bike fitting, where they have silicone beads in a vacuum bag, and you it's like standing in sand, and you make this form, and then you mold the footbed into those. And that's a way of sort of customizing that to your foot. And then you have full custom casted orthotics, which you might go to a podiatrist to have made, or a footbed specialist, where they might cast your foot in plaster, or even 3D scan it, and make a model of your foot, and then build a footbed against that male mold of your foot.
Yeah. So there's lots of different options out there.
Yeah, from like 30 quid to
200.
400.
Yeah, 400 quid. But you're saying that people could just start with buying an off-the-shelf footbed, and if it's about the right shape for your foot and kind of works with your foot shape, then that could be all they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And the way to tell is put it in your cycling shoe and get on a bike and pedal away. And if you feel that it's touching, then that's in most of your arch, almost all of your arch, 70% or more, then you're probably there.
Yeah.
If you feel it's painful, it's a bit too much.
Yeah.
If you can't really feel it when you're sat on the bike pedaling, then it's
probably
probably
not
doing
enough.
what it needs to do.
Yeah. But the main point is to test it out, try it out.
Yeah.
I guess you could do that yourself by ordering a load of stuff in, or go see your bike fitter, see your local bike fitter.
It sounds easier.
Yeah. And then
You might get lucky.
Yeah.
And if you're interested, then by all means play around yourself. But
Yeah. But there is a big difference between the G8 customizable insoles and the kind of heat molded and custom molded Sidus insoles, in that the G8s have quite a flexible arch piece, whereas the kind of heat molded ones tend to be more rigid.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah. Do you see a kind of pros and cons of either system?
I when my brain was still in arch support mode, when I was still thinking this is holding the arch up, stopping it from collapsing, the logical thought then is the stiffer the better. I need something really solid to stop my arch collapsing. When I started realizing that's not what we're doing with this thing, we're actually just stimulating the nerves, then I started experimenting with softer footbeds. So I made everything from absolutely rock solid carbon fiber footbeds to composite ones, again made out of carbon fiber, but just very soft and flexible, or materials like plastics, thin plastics that were very soft. And I realized they did exactly the same job. As long as it touches, then it has the same effect. And that effect can be quite big on some people and a bit smaller on others. But the effect is of one of really improving their posture, their alignment, their symmetry, their coordination, their control, their feeling of stability and solidity and connection with the bike, and that feeling of really being able to drive the legs hard. And that could be achieved with the really stiff one or the really soft one. What I noticed was that it's much more comfortable to walk in the really soft one. Cycling wasn't any different, but walking around, the soft one was better.
I think it depends on the philosophy that you want to follow in terms of foot function. I think the kind of, I tend to describe the more rigid arch supports as, I said it again, arch supports, footbeds, as kind of more like a crutch solution, where you're kind of locking the foot into a certain position, but it doesn't particularly encourage any foot strength or any kind of change within the foot in that sense, whereas a more flexible footbed or arch piece will allow the foot to gain some of that natural movement. So when you compress your foot under load, then the arch will lower just a little bit. And so that more flexible arch piece will allow for some of that more natural movement. You may get a bit more of that natural movement in your foot again. And it really depends rider to rider what feels best. I think if you've got reasonable foot function, I think the more malleable or kind of softer arch supports seem to make more sense. But if you really need to, if you have poorer foot function and foot strength, then maybe you just need your foot kind of held into place to almost teach it to be in that position first before you can get some good kind of movement back into it. But you know, it depends again, like do riders want to kind of work on their feet? Do they not? You know, some people don't. You just kind of, you know, want the best solution.
It's an interesting thought, and when I've been through this thought process myself, I think about when we measure the force through the feet, even when we're pushing what we think is pretty hard on the pedals, there's very little force through the feet compared to when we're standing. There's much greater force through our feet when we stand, and there's much, much greater force through our feet when we start to walk and then run. So the force gets much exponentially greater.
Yeah, it's like 4 times body weight when you're running.
Yeah, right. And is much less than body weight when you cycle, even when you're pushing really hard. When you're doing 300 watts, it's still not even close to standing.
Yeah.
And so the chances of your arch moving are much, much less, even when you're pushing really hard on the pedals. So again, I don't think there's much difference between stiff and soft when you're cycling. I think I kind of agree with you in terms of footbeds off the bike being a crutch. I don't think we're supposed to, as humans, need footbeds. I don't think that's... We're supposed to be able to walk and run without them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And a well-functioning human does that. But just like if you break your leg, you need a bit of help getting around, you need a crutch to hold you up.
Yeah.
And so there's some people with low enough function where a footbed for walking and running will really help them to get around. But the goal is not that they walk and run with a crutch forever, so they don't walk and run with a footbed forever. They help their foot to recover and get strong enough. And that's where I think the difference between a stiff footbed and a softer one starts to become an arguable issue. When you're off the bike, using a footbed to recover and improve your foot function. But I'm not convinced that there's any real difference when you cycle between really stiff ones and soft ones.
Yeah.
Other than people who have great sensitivity in their feet. Like very, very sensitive feet. Then something a little bit softer might just feel a bit more comfortable.
Yeah. And I definitely feel like most, certainly from a cycling perspective, that crutch analogy isn't necessarily bad. Like we need it when we cycle.
We do need a footbed when we cycle, and that's the difference, is that we have a problem when we cycle that we don't have when we walk and run.
Yeah.
So I don't really believe in footbeds for walking and running. I really do believe in footbeds for cycling.
Yeah.
For like 98% of people, then you want to cycle at your best, you have to have a footbed and wedges.
Yeah. And knowing that, I think, is a really important thing for riders to acknowledge, what is happening to their feet when you put them into those cycling shoes.
Yeah, and that's it, because what's cool about the human body on a bike is that it can do the job of cycling without any sort of bike fitting, in a bad setup. With a poor bike fit, you can get on a bike and you're way more effective than walking and running for actually getting anywhere. So like, even if it's set up terribly, it's still really fun, number one, and really efficient.
Yeah.
But yeah, it starts to get unfun when the fit's not quite right, and you start to get uncomfortable and you feel those inefficiencies, or you just want to be as good as possible. And so then the argument is, if you want it to be as good as possible, then we need to resolve that issue.
Yeah.
You do need footbed and wedges.
Yeah. But also just being aware of that, the consequence of just doing a lot of, if you just do cycling, because it's unnatural, you're not loading your body weight, your foot function will deteriorate if you just do cycling and do nothing else.
Yeah.
And it's just that awareness of what's happening to your body when you cycle. So
That's true. I think what I was wanting to say, and I didn't, was that people are unaware that they have a problem with their feet.
Yeah.
So you can ride a bike and be blissfully unaware that your brain isn't connecting with the bottom of your feet. Yeah. Like, nobody has ever come to me and go, you know what's wrong with my cycling? So I can't, my subconscious brain can't feel where my feet are. And people come to me and go, look, my feet feel fine. They're not, I don't feel numb, or I don't feel pain in my feet. Do I really need those footbeds and wedges? And so your body doesn't tell you that you need it. It's like always riding with the saddle too low. If you've never experienced the saddle at the right height, you're like, I'm fine. My knees don't hurt. I don't have lower backache. I feel pretty good like this. And then you get your saddle at the right height and you're like, oh, wow, this feels so much better. Yeah. I didn't know I needed it. And that's the way it is with footbeds, is that people don't recognize their need, because it doesn't always show in pain or discomfort. It's not always, I dropped down to my right side, so I have this saddle sore or my knee hurts. I mean, that can happen. But for most people, it doesn't. And they cycle, and again, in the professional peloton, they cycle around blissfully unaware that they're dealing with this problem. Which sort of leads me into one of the things I think is really cool about this, is that when we get this right, especially for training athletes, is that we see significant performance gains, and especially over time. Because what you're doing when you give the brain the information it needs is it relaxes the central nervous system. It makes it easier. And so every single training effort that you do is easier and doesn't need to be... Remember, I said we need to lie down and recover from what we've done today, which is basically nothing, but actually quite a lot. Our central nervous system was working the whole time. And still we need 8 hours of sleep to recover from no physical activity, no cycling. Now imagine your cycling has another level of stress on top of the normal one of just exerting yourselves, but a neurological stress that you then need to recover from. You take that away, what happens is cyclists break through that plateau that they were struggling with. Oh, I've gotten this fit, and to get to the next level, it's going to take a lot more work. Well, actually, just set your feet better, And
Yeah.
you naturally will just push through that, because every time you ride, it's just less stressful on your nervous system. Your body is, one, making much better quality movements, so you're less likely to get injured. But two, you can do a harder training ride for the same amount of energy expenditure or time to recovery.
Yeah.
And that's really meaningful. That's a real performance gain.
Yeah.
Hard to measure, but anecdotally you get a lot of reports of riders.
Yeah.
Just and in the professional peloton, I've had riders tell me that every year I get about 3/4 of the way through my season, and then my knee goes or my back goes or whatever it is for them. And then after having got their footbeds and wedges in, they never had any foot pain, never had any issues with their feet. But we get the footbeds in there and the wedges right, and they say, "No, I can do a whole season." And for a professional rider, that's really
massive.
useful.
Yeah.
That means they get picked for the Vuelta,
Yeah.
or even the Tour de France, because they're robust. Or we won't pick that guy because we know he's going to start falling apart and his backache comes back or his knee pain, and then he's useless to us. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I think everyone who I tend to work with, and we get really deep into feet, really enjoy it, and they come back like, oh my god, I couldn't believe how good my cycling could be with like these arch.
It doesn't feel necessarily bad without them, but feels so much better with them.
Yeah, but they're necessary. Yeah. Well, I guess that's the thing about cycling, isn't it? You can get away with so much for such a long time, and that the whole reason why is because we were not loading the body that much. Going back to your
low impact,
and so on, and so we can get away with so much. But if we really want to make the most of our kind of cycling, then footbeds definitely like a massive gain.
Yeah, and for a lot of the people that I make footbeds for, and I'm sure you feel the same, then it can be that thing of all the adjustments we make where they go, my feet feel amazing. So their saddle height's been 3 centimeters wrong, and their bar's too far away, and the bars are too wide, and you make all those changes, and they go, that feels better, that feels better. And then you set up their feet, and they go, oh, that feels incredible.
Yeah. I had a guy who came in the other day. He had a pair of carbon fiber custom-made insoles by yourself in his old pair of shoes. He said he felt amazing. Did London to Manchester, really cool. Got some new shoes. Sold some G8s and so on. Came to me because he felt terrible in them. So we just had to kind of work on his feet a lot and kind of get the wedging right and kind of heel lifts and stuff like that. Got it back into that kind of nice kind of position again.
So what did you end up doing with the G8s? Just changing the arch height to get the right one?
Changing the arch height, changing the arch position, getting some heel wedges in there to get better contact through his heel. So he's loading through the whole of his foot rather than just the front of his foot. And we'll see how he goes. But how do you feel about arch or footbeds transferring across from different pairs of shoes?
Oh, that's a good question. So if you've got 2 pairs of shoes and you want to use the same footbed in both pairs, that kind of thing, or buying new shoes, and it usually works fine. But some shoes have an arch contour in the sole, and some footbeds are quite solid, so that curve in the sole of the shoe pushes up the arch even higher. So in one shoe it's just right, and the other shoe it's too high. Or in one shoe it's too high, and the other shoe you can't feel it. So usually it works fine, but it doesn't always. So sometimes you need to change footbeds when you change shoes.
Yeah, absolutely. So check that. Like
wedges usually stay the same. But also wedges are. We haven't really talked about wedges, have we?
No, we might have to leave that to another one.
We'll just say that it's in order to get that reconnection with the brain. For almost everyone, it's a combination of a footbed and wedges, not just a footbed. And although you could maybe argue that the more useful thing is the footbed, you won't get permanent reconnection without the right amount of wedges, and that's really just tilting the foot, either in the front, under the toes, or underneath the heel.
Yeah. You know who we should get on to talk about wedges? Ronan.
That would be great. Yeah,
because he makes them.
he makes them. Yeah.
So yeah, Ronan Desi, if you're listening, you're up next. But yeah, I think that's really useful. Some useful takeaways for the listeners. Get some arch support, or explore some footbeds if you haven't done.
Yeah.
Figure out if your cycling could be even better just by optimizing your foot function.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, just have some fun with it. Whether you want to go down the custom route, you can get some custom carbon fiber made footbeds with you, Tony, can't you? You still doing that?
Occasionally.
Yeah. Only for very special customers.
Yeah. It's only when I really have to.
Yeah. Handmade in Bolton.
Yeah.
Bolton? No.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Or, you can explore any of the other kind of options too. But if you are getting a pair custom made or molded, then it also depends on the skill of the maker at the same time.
When I speak to the people who train podiatrists, they say that it takes them a long time to train a podiatrist, and a podiatrist does that all day.
Yeah.
And they see a very big difference between one podiatrist and another podiatrist and the quality of the work they do when they make footbeds.
Yeah.
It's a hand skill.
Yeah.
You're crafting, and some people are good at that and some people are less good at it.
Yeah.
And we as bike fitters probably make less footbeds than a podiatrist does, and not trained as well. The chances of us getting it right are slightly lower. And so that's one of the things that we as bike fitters need to do more work in. And I guess I see that when I work with bike fitters, is that there's a big variation in the quality of the heat molded footbeds that come out. I think it's one of the reasons why the G8's been so popular.
Yeah,
it's a bit easier to get a good quality result.
Yeah. So to get a good quality footbed, I would probably advise you go and talk to your bike fitter before getting them done. See how much experience they've had and how they go about the process.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to find out who's going to do a really good job for you and who isn't. It's really hard for me to tell without just having a pair made.
Yeah, or even just having the ability to go back and remold them.
Yeah.
Like if you want someone who wants to help you.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
Figure that out.
Yeah.
So yeah, like the chances of getting it absolutely spot on the first time.
Well, I can't do that every time.
Yeah.
So,
anything custom. That's the ironic thing about custom, right? It's never just right first time, or very low chances. So you just got to go and have the opportunity to kind of tweak it.
Yeah, and again, why for the general consumer, I think the G8's so good. It's fairly expensive. What is it, £110 now?
Yeah, like retail. I think most people sell them for about 95 these days. So.
And that's relatively expensive compared to the Specialized, which is like 30 quid.
Yeah.
But the ability to fiddle around with it yourself, or in the bike fit, is high.
Enough about butts. All right, I think we'll leave that there.
All right,
there's quite a lot there for you to take in. So if you made it to the end, well done.
Well done. Have some tea and cake.
Yeah. Clotted cream. I think that cream's getting to us too. So if you have any questions for Tony, where can we find you, Tony?
Tony at torquecycling.com is my email address, or you want to check out the website, it's torquecycling.com.
Oh, hey. And if you're an aspiring bike fitter, come get on Tony's courses.
Yeah, most of what I do is teaching bike fitters and people who want to be bike fitters.
Yeah.
And also do bike fitting and custom bikes and even custom footbeds.
Yeah, all the fun stuff.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Thank you, Wade.
No problem. Always a pleasure talking to you, Tony.
You too.
And we'll catch you next time.
Okay.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
Here's what I want you to do. I want you to tell all your friends about me. At Cycling Demystified on Instagram. Tell everyone. And leave us a review on your podcast platform, whether it's Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, whatever. That would help us out a lot. Suffering from numb hands, tingling toes, and any other persistent discomforts when you ride? These are all signs that your bike fit could be improved. If you're bike fit curious, get in touch with Way or Matt by emailing info@foundation.fit or finding them on Instagram @FDN_bikefit. Finally, for all your bike servicing needs, custom dream bike or hand-built wheels, go to www.frequencycycleworks.com or find me on Instagram @frequencycycleworks. Until next time.